I invite you to grab a Bible and to turn with me to the book of Daniel. As we go halfway through the book now, and we're at a really significant turning transition point. This whole book is following the story of four friends, but really one particular friend who's kind of the lead of the group, but there's four of them, and they're Israelites, and they've been exiled to a foreign land, a foreign city, and the whole book's about their struggle to remain faithful to their God while living in a foreign land, while living as a minority group in a culture that is hostile to them and their way of life. And so talk about themes that are significant for followers of Jesus living in any nation in the world. But living in ours, or at least in certain places, in a culture like Portland, that is open-minded to many, many things. But when it comes to the way of life of the people of Jesus, there's a tension, right? There's a hostility that can open up towards followers of Jesus. And so what does it mean to maintain faithfulness and to maintain hope? A follower of Jesus is somebody who believes that Jesus is actually the king of the world and that Jesus is the king of Portland. And does the life and culture of Portland reflect the fact that Jesus is the king of Portland? Yeah, not so much on that one. So what's up with that? If Jesus is really the king of the world, if I really believe that, think of where the world's attention is right now in terms of world conflicts or something like that. You just think of one part of the world, the Middle East, as Iraq dissolves and Syria. Just the sheer number of innocent people who have died because of the civil war in Syria. And that's just one part of planet Earth. I don't know if any of you read the headlines that came out in this last week of the city with the highest homicide rate in America right now. It's the city of Chicago. And 64 people were shot over the weekend in West and South Chicago, just last weekend. The great number of those were just people sitting on their front porches, getting caught in the crossfire. And you and I are crazy enough to believe that this is the kind of world where Jesus is actually king. How do you believe that? How do you maintain that belief and that hope? It's hard enough to remain faithful to Jesus, but much less to look at world events and to say that Jesus is king. Welcome to Daniel chapter 7. Welcome to Daniel chapter 7. What this book has been about is these four individuals who maintain faithfulness and hope when there are no signs of hope on the horizon. We opened the series, and I'm just going to do a quick recap because we're halfway through the book, and this chapter 7 is a transition in how the book works. We showed a Bible Project video summarizing the book at the beginning. We're not going to do that again, but I thought just get the poster up here, just a quick recap. You guys with me? I'm going to make you do it anyways. Just wanted you to participate. Okay, so here we go. We've got up in the upper left, Jerusalem's conquered by Babylon, all these Israelites taken as prisoners. And the opening story set the theme and the tension. You have Daniel and his four friends, and they engage in life in Babylon. They take Babylonian names, they dress like Babylonians, they get government jobs, for goodness sakes. So they don't cloister away in their own little subculture. They're fully engaged. And as they try to remain faithful, they hit these tension points where their way of life as God's people comes into conflict with Babylonian way of life. In chapter 1, it was food. And so they refused to eat the food of Babylon that would be a compromise for them. And you remember their lives were in danger because of that. But they maintained faithfulness, and God delivers them. And in fact, they end up being elevated because of their faithfulness. Then after that, chapter 2, we had this dream. You remember that? King of Babylon had this crazy dream about a statue. And the statue was made out of all these types of metals. And the statue represented the kingdoms of the world, and a whole sequence of kingdoms that would go throughout history until one day a big meteorite comes and blows up the statue. And that meteorite grows into a mountain, and that's a symbol for God's reign and rule over the world that will confront the Babylons of this world. After that, we had another story, chapter 3, the famous story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember that one? And they also won't compromise. They won't give their allegiance to the idols of the empire in the form of the statue. And so they are thrown to their death, thrown to the fire. But God delivers them from death, and they're exalted by the king of Babylon afterwards. Then we had two separate stories, chapters 4 and 5, about two kings of Babylon, the father and the son. And they're both arrogant and prideful and think that they rule the world. And so God confronts them with dreams and visions. And God humiliates Nebuchadnezzar, who won't humble himself before God. And so he becomes, do you remember, what does he become? He becomes a beast. Just tuck that away. He becomes a beast. And he goes and lives in the field and eats grass and has long claws. And so he becomes an animal. And it's only when he humbles himself before God's rule and reign over the world that he becomes human again. Contrast his son, Belshazzar, and he does not humble himself before God, and so he gets assassinated that very day. After this comes a story, chapter 6. This was last week. And it's very similar to chapters 1 and 3. It's just Daniel, and he refuses to pray to the God, the king of the empire, as if he's a god. He gives his allegiance and his prayers only to the God of Israel. And so his life's on the line. He's also thrown to his death, but not in the fire this time, but to the beasts, the lions. And God delivers him, and he is elevated again. So that's the theme of the story, and you can see there's a really cool literary design going on here. Chapter 1 is in the Hebrew language. Chapters 2, leading up to what we're reading today, is in Aramaic, a cousin language. And the Aramaic section has this really cool design where this, can you see it? We tried to put it there visually. The stories are paralleled in this really beautiful design. 4 and 5, 3 and 6, 2 and 7. 2 and 7 are both about dreams, where there's a sequence of 4 that's the main flow of the dream. Except the person having the dream here in this story, Daniel 7, it's not the king who's having a nightmare this time. It's Daniel. It's Daniel. The stage is set. How'd you sleep last night? Some of you don't have AC. The majority of you don't have AC. How's it going for you? Did you have weird dreams? Heat can cause bad dreams sometimes. So just while you're reading, just remember, your dream could have been worse. It could have been like this one. Could have been like this one. Daniel chapter 7. You guys with me? Okay. In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream. Visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night, I looked, and before me were the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the other, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion. It had the wings of an eagle, and I watched until its wings were torn off, and then it was lifted up from the ground, and it stood on 2 feet, like a human. And the mind of a human was given to it. Then before me was the second beast, and that one looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, 'Get up, eat your fill of flesh.' And then after that I looked, and there was another beast. And this one looked like a leopard, but it's a mega leopard. Right? Death leopard. It's the intense leopard. Because look, it's got 4 wings on his back like that of a bird, and it has 4 heads, given authority to rule. Then, after that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there was in front of me a 4th beast, terrifying, frightening, very powerful. It had huge iron teeth. It crushed and it devoured its victims. It trampled underfoot whatever was left. And it was different than the former beast because it had 10 horns. And while I was sitting there looking at the horns, thinking about them like you would too, there before me was another horn. It was little, and then it came up among them. And 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it, and this horn had eyes like a human, and it had a mouth that spoke boastfully. Okay, let's stop. How you doing? The Bible is so weird. Okay. So, was this stranger than your dream last night? I wager that it is. We can zoom in. Yeah, there we go. So we'll help let this kind of guide us here, this kind of visual summary of the vision here. So 4 beasts, 4 wild animals, but he doesn't say they are a lion or a bear. They're like a lion, like a 4-headed winged leopard, right? So clearly we're talking in terms of metaphor or symbol here. And the 4th beast doesn't even get likened to any known beast. It's the mega beast. It's the super beast. And the thing about this is just that it's terrifying and tramples and eats and devours and horns and so on. Now, so you might be weirded out about all of this, and that's fine. It's a decent response. For the author and the readers of Daniel, for Jewish readers whose minds are steeped in the scriptures, this is all tracking. You're tracking with all of this. This is all familiar type of imagery to you. If your mind is steeped, like Daniel's was, in the poetry of the Psalms and of the prophetic writings in the Old Testament scriptures, you know already that when the prophets want to describe oppressive, violent kingdoms, they will turn to images of wild animals. So just one example, truly at random. I could show you 24 right now, but here's just one from Isaiah chapter 5, where Isaiah describes the horror of the armies of Babylon coming for Jerusalem. And he puts it like this. He says, "The Lord lifts up a banner for the distant nations, and he whistles for those at the ends of the earth. Here they come, swiftly, speedily. Their arrows are sharp, and their bows are strung, and their roar is like that of a lion. They roar like young lions. They growl and seize their prey and then carry it off with no one to rescue." So Isaiah describes the coming of Babylon like a pack of lions leaping out of the bushes, grabbing somebody and dragging them off, and no one sees them ever again. It's like that. So this is stock imagery that would be familiar to you. And so the fact that Daniel would have a dream about wild beasts, you begin to, you know what he's talking about. But these aren't just beasts. The mega beast, the super beast, the 4th one, what's he got growing out of his head? Well, these horns, which is also a familiar image to you if you have a mind immersed in the Psalms and the prophets. Horns are a symbol of power and strength. Think like a bull, with big horns, and they're both, they can do violence with them. Poke you. The bull doesn't poke you with its horns, right? It runs you through. So, but it's also this symbol of its power and strength. So Psalm 75, just literally pulled at random. I could show you many more passages. Talk about how God relates to proud horns. The Lord says, "I've chosen the appointed time. It is I who bring justice with fairness. To the arrogant I say, boast no more, and to the wicked, don't lift up your horns. Don't lift your horns against heaven. Don't speak so defiantly. I will cut off the horns of all the wicked, but the horns of the righteous will be lifted up." So horns aren't in and of themselves bad, right? Because the righteous can have horns that God will exalt because of their faithfulness. But these people with horns that lift them up to heaven and speak defiantly against God. Do you get it? You get it on an intuitive level, these images here. And so Daniel, he's raised on this stuff. And he's sitting in Babylon, and he's been delivered from the lions, and things have worked out so far. But you have to imagine, a guy gets tired trying to be faithful in Babylon. And he works for the government. And then he hears that Babylon's gone on another expedition and conquered another people group and destroyed their culture. And he's, how long is this going to go on? I thought the God of Israel is the king of the world. And I'm sitting here in Babylon, and Jerusalem's lying in ruins, and Babylon seems to rule everything. And he has this dream about these violent beasts coming, and a great train of beasts, and they're horrible. And then the last one is the most violent and the most horrible. Verse 9. Then I looked, and thrones were set in place. And the Ancient of Days, it's a great, great image for the God of Israel. He's the eternal one, the king of time and history. He came and took his seat. His clothing was white like snow, and the hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were ablaze. This is what I've come to call the Godmobile. Right? It's a mobile throne chariot mobile, yeah? Flames like hot rod, right? So, and a river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him, and there's thousands upon thousands attending him. It's right, these angelic attendants and servants. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Then the court was seated, and the books were opened. So you have all these beasts who seem to run the world, and they're violent, and especially this last most horrible beast is horned and proud, and then God shows up as king and as judge. And it's this image of God arriving in his royal power as the creator, and he comes, the court sits like a big courtroom, and God's going to bring justice on the beast. And so the books are opened. And what happens? Well, I continued to watch, verse 11, because of the boastful words that the horn was speaking. And I kept looking until the beast was slain, its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. Now the other beasts had been stripped of their authority and were allowed to live for a period of time. Then, what happens to the beast? Is it found guilty or innocent? Guilty. And what's its sentence? Destruction. Then in my vision, verse 13, at night I kept looking, and there before me was one like a son of man. Yeah? Son of man. Now you might have a little footnote there kind of explaining to you this interesting little phrase. The Hebrew word for humanity or man, you've learned it before. Pop quiz. Adam or Adam. Yeah, Adam. Now, is this part of the book written in Hebrew? It's not. It's written in Aramaic. What's the Aramaic word for humanity? Adam. Or Adam. That's a trick question. Hebrew and Aramaic, they're cousin languages, like French or Spanish. It's a shared word between the two languages. There's no way you would know that, but that was unfair of me. Anyhow, pop quiz. So, the son of Adam. It's a phrase that just means a human one. So amidst all of the beasts, the beast there and the mega beast was trampling and devouring everybody, and the beast is sentenced to destruction. And then, after the beast is sentenced to destruction, we discover that there is a human one there. Apparently, as we're going to see, he was among those who were trampled and destroyed by the beast. But there's a human one there now that Daniel sees. And this human one came with the clouds of heaven and approached the Ancient of Days. It's this image of ascent. The human one is exalted on a cloud up into the presence of the Ancient of Days. And the human one, the Son of Man, was given authority, and glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped this human one. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that won't pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. How you guys doing? Now, Who's okay? Let's pause. All right. So let's get our bearings again. What do you think these beasts are images of, given what we know about the image of wild animals and the prophets? They're going to be kings or kingdoms or something like that. And these horns, right, are images of wicked, prideful people, or the people who lead these kingdoms. So if they represent kings, then this human one is also this symbol or image of some kind. Who's that? Right. All right, so a whisper of Jesus just swept through the whole room. As good instinct, and I agree with you, but we have to take a couple steps to get there. But here's one fun fact, and use it at a get-together this Friday night. Jesus. Most people, if they want to use Jesus' name as a curse word, right, they'll say Jesus Christ. Now, Christ is not Jesus' last name. He wasn't born to marry Christ, right? So it's a title. It's a title that means Messiah, king, anointed king. And Jesus accepted that title. It became one of the main ways that early Christians came to refer to Jesus. Interesting fact, however, Jesus never used that title to describe himself. He allowed himself to be called by that title, but he never used it of himself. Jesus used a much more interesting title to refer to himself. He does it all the time if you read the stories about him. And what is that title? The Son of Man. Where did Jesus get the title, the Son of Man, to call himself that? Right? We're reading it. Why did Jesus call himself by the title of this human figure who's been trampled and destroyed by the beast, but then once the beast is destroyed, he gets vindicated and exalted to share in God's rule over the world? Jesus chose that title to describe himself and what he was all about. Why? Let's keep reading. Verse 15. So I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind, they really disturbed me, like they would you too. So I approached one of those standing there. Remember, there's thousands and thousands of these angelic attendants. So he goes up to one. He can interpret the king's weird dreams, right? But he can't interpret his own. So he has to go to this other being who's there, and I asked him the meaning of all of this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation. And you just get a summary right here of the whole thing. The four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth. Anybody surprised? No, we knew that already, that these were going to be symbols for kingdoms and kings. So the beasts represent kingdoms and kings. What about the Son of Man? But the holy people, or the holy ones of the Most High, will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yeah, that's right, forever and ever. So if the beasts are kings and kingdoms, according to the angelic interpreter, who or what is the human one a symbol for? The holy people. God's holy people. And just stop and think about this. So he has a dream about God's faithful, holy people getting trampled and persecuted and destroyed by the beast. And then, right when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the beast gets judged and destroyed, and its arrogant kings are sentenced to destruction. And God's holy, faithful people are exalted and vindicated to a place of authority. Can I think of a book in the Bible where there's stories about God's faithful people who end up under the authority of a beastly empire, and they're persecuted, and they're destroyed, and they're even killed, or the beast tries to murder them, but God vindicates them from the beast and gives them a place of authority? Can I think of a book of the Bible that has stories about that kind of thing? Oh, right, it's called the book of Daniel. And Daniel chapter 1, Daniel chapter 2. Are you with me? The stories about Daniel, this vision, first and foremost, it's a story about the experience of Daniel and the friends who become these models of God's faithful people. And Daniel's sitting there in Babylon, and he's wondering, how long are these beastly kingdoms going to destroy God's world and destroy innocent people? And he has this dream that in essence tells him, not forever. Not forever. The time will one day be up for these beastly kingdoms, and God will exalt his faithful people. And he'll deliver them from the beast and exalt them to a place of rule over the world. You guys with me? Now, if you're wondering why I didn't say Jesus, just hang tight. Let's finish the dream. Verse 19. So I wanted to know the meaning about that fourth beast, because he was different than the others. He was so terrifying with his iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. And I also wanted to know about those 10 horns on its head, and about that one horn that came up and 3 other horns fell before it, because that horn looked more imposing than the others. It had eyes and a mouth and spoke boastfully. And as I watched, that was the horn that was waging war against whom? Against the human one, right, in the vision. But he swaps into the place of the human one, who it refers to, the holy ones, God's holy people. So the horn was waging war against God's holy people, defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the Son of Man, the holy people of the Most High. And then the time came when they possessed the kingdom. What's that all about? Daniel asked the interpreter. He gave me this explanation. That fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour all the land, trampling, crushing. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different than those kings. He'll subdue 3 kings. He'll speak against the Most High and oppress the Son of Man, the holy people. He'll try to change the set times and the laws, and the holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. It's a good album title for something. So it's a cryptic way that could either mean a year, 1 year, 2 years, half a year, 3.5 years, i.e., or it could be something more cryptic and symbolic for a short period of time. Lots of debate about that. But nonetheless, the Son of Man figure won't be trampled and destroyed forever, because the court will sit, and the beast's power will be taken away. He'll be completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms of under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and the rulers will worship and obey him. And that's the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts. My face turned pale. He lost his coloring. And I kept the matter to myself, because you go around sharing that kind of dream with other people, and what are they going to think about you? That you had Chipotle before you went to bed or something like that. I don't know. There you go. That's it. How you guys doing? So here's the deal. You know, we come to the Sunday gathering, and all kinds of stories that we bring with us of joy, stories of pain or loss or confusion. And we come to meet together as Jesus' followers. We come to take the bread and the cup, to hear from the scriptures. And we come and we hear an ancient story about a guy's bad dream. What does this have to do with anything? Well, remember, the whole book of Daniel is about fostering hope, among God's people. That despite the fact that when God's people are faithful, they'll always be a minority, and they'll always be in tension with the culture around them that will be hostile to their beliefs and their way of life. And this dream, strange as it is to you, is a way of fostering hope. And you can probably see how it does that. It just does it in a way that feels weird to you because of the mega super horn beast, But that's what this is about. This is about Daniel looking out at the beasts of the world, which are these collective kingdoms, right? Full of people who ruin and destroy each other and who destroy God's good world, and the innocent suffer and die. And what's good news to him, just the bottom line, is that it's not going to last forever. God won't tolerate forever what humans do to each other and do to his world. There comes a moment that becomes Daniel's hope that God will bring his justice and that he'll sentence the beast to destruction and that he'll vindicate his faithful people who have suffered and allow them to share in his rule over the world. It's the bottom line. You guys with me? Now, but there's more to it than that. There's a lot more detail. A lot of numbers, kings and 3 horns and 3.5 years. And what does all this refer to? So let me make a short story boring, because you could read a whole library of books about different views on what this refers to. There are some people who are really smart, that I respect a lot, who think that all of this, the mega super horn beast, refers specifically to the train of kingdoms that comes from Daniel's time period, starting with Babylon. So Babylon being the lion, the Persians that came after the Babylonians being the bear, and then the Greek kingdom of Alexander the Great being the mega four-headed leopard, deaf leopard, right? And then the super mega horn beast, in this view, refers to the kingdom of the Syrians. About 160 years before Jesus, the Syrians came and inherited what was left of Alexander the Great's kingdom that he divided up over the land that we call Israel-Palestine now. And he was a really horrible person. He brought onto the city of Jerusalem the greatest persecution of the Jewish people that they had ever known up to that point. He conquered Jerusalem. Antiochus is the name of the king, and he actually made it illegal to practice Judaism in Jerusalem. He cleared out the temple in Jerusalem and filled it full of idols to his gods, and then he actually began to murder and torture Jewish people in the temple courtyard, people who were still gathering in their homes to read the Torah and keep the Sabbath, and so on. And he stopped the sacrificial system, he stopped the calendar of Passover, and so on. So there are lots of people who think that that is the set of events that this is referring to. There are other groups of really smart people that I respect, many of them at least, and they don't think it refers primarily to something in the past. They think it still refers to something yet to happen in the future, even from our point of view. Namely, a set of events that will happen in and around Jerusalem that's the prelude to Jesus returning. And so a new kingdom of Jewish people in the city of Jerusalem. There's a new temple being built that doesn't exist right now because the Dome of the Rock is there in Jerusalem. And that somehow that's all going to be returned and restored. And then some mega super horned beast, Antichrist, is going to come and try and take over the world, and that Jesus will return and wipe him out, and so on. So that's that view. There's a really distorted, screwed up version of that view available in bookstores near you called the Left Behind series. Or movies that feature Kirk Cameron that I would never recommend that you watch. But all the same, so some of you know these views. Those are the two main views that are out there that somehow these are pointing towards. Which one of those is right? I've become less concerned with that question over time. And the reason why is because what I'm most concerned with is how Jesus read and understood this chapter of his scriptures. Because Jesus used the title from this chapter to describe himself. Do you think this chapter is important to Jesus? If the title he used to describe himself was drawn from it. And what's interesting is Jesus quotes from and uses language and imagery from Daniel's dream here multiple times. You can go look them up for yourselves. But there's one that's really telling, and that I think invites us to see how Jesus read and understood this chapter, and it's not actually either of these views. It's the story of Jesus' trial, when he gets arrested by the leaders of Jerusalem, and he's arraigned and sentenced on completely false charges. And here's the scene right here. You can just read it for yourself. Then those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest in Jerusalem, where the teachers of the law, the elders, had all assembled. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. So, okay, let's just pause real quick here. Among the leadership of Israel, who's represented here? You could say it this way: who's not represented? It's everybody, right? It's the high priest, the most powerful individual at that time in the city of Jerusalem. Then you have all of the chief priests, right, his cabinet. Then you have the elders, who are elders in villages and towns. And then you have the Sanhedrin, who is like their law court. It's the whole government is represented there before Jesus. And what are they going to do? They're going to execute him on what they know to be totally false charges. So the high priest said to Jesus, "I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you're the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus, it's so great. It's typical Jesus. You said so. I don't know. You said so. You say I'm the Messiah, I guess. I'll tell you who I am, Jesus says. Here's what I say to all of you. From this moment on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. And he just doesn't say anything else the rest of the trial. Do you get it? Jesus, the cookies are not on the bottom shelf here, you guys. It's really nuanced. He's in a room full of Bible scholars, and he quotes from Daniel 7 right at the key moment there. So think of it this way. If let's say it's the Star Wars convention, right, next week, right? And say I walk into the Star Wars convention and I wear a black helmet and I'm carrying a red lightsaber, and I go around saying to people, "I'm your father." Now, if I'm in a Star Wars convention, do I have to tell you who I'm acting like? You know what I'm saying? Who am I acting like? I'm acting like Darth Vader. Okay. Do I have to, and if I say to you, "I'm your father," do I have to tell you who I'm treating you like? Who am I treating you like? Like you're Luke. Do I have to tell you that? No, of course not. It's a Star Wars convention, for goodness sakes. All right? Jesus is in a room full of Bible scholars. They're going to sentence him on completely false charges. What did he do? He went around announcing the kingdom of God. He went around healing sick people, good news for the poor, inviting them to these feasts and parties he would throw. And he did have harsh words for the people sitting in that room about how they'd abused their positions of authority and distorted the people of Israel. But he wasn't a military threat to them. He never threatened to bomb anything. And so here they are. They're going to find murder charges, right? These trumped up charges they're not real. They know it's a sham. He knows it's a sham. And what he says to them is, the moment that you sentence me to death is the moment that the Son of Man is vindicated from the beast and exalted to sit at the right hand of God. Who is Jesus implying that he is? The human one, the Son of Man. Who is Jesus? He doesn't have to say it because they're all Bible nerds. Right? It's just very clear. Who is Jesus saying the high priest of Israel is? The beast, of course. Who is Jesus saying the chief priests and the elders and the Sanhedrin, the people of Israel, have become what? the beast, the mega super horn beast. Jerusalem has become Babylon to Jesus. Apparently in Jesus' mind, Daniel 7 isn't the kind of thing that is just a single promise waiting a single referent in the past or a single referent in the future. In Jesus' mind, apparently, Daniel 7 is like a set of clothes. It's a type of humanity. It's a type of kingdom and a type of person that almost all humans and all human kingdoms eventually become. And so at the moment that he faces the corrupt, violent, self-protective fear and murderous intent of his own people, he just calls it like it is. You're the beast, and you're about to destroy the Son of Man. Jesus sees himself as the one faithful people of God. And he claims that in himself, he is actually embodying and being the only faithful Israelite. And that the rest of Israel has actually given in to the way of Babylon and gone the way of the beast. That, it seems to me, is very clear of what Jesus is doing with Daniel chapter 7. Which means this, that these dreams and these prophecies aren't just about one thing. This is a way of talking about human history. And in these beast images, they're a way of talking about the human condition. Because apparently, from Jesus' point of view, anybody can become the beast. So stop and think about that for a second. What is all this beast imagery about? So I spent a week in the Grand Canyon, trekking through the Grand Canyon over the last week. It's amazing, and you should do it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the relationships between humans and beasts. Because there's a lot of beasts in the Grand Canyon. The most exciting encounter, what doesn't sound exciting, but it was exciting in the moment, was in the middle of the night. We had to get up early to make a big climb the next day, and at midnight, a family of skunks came through our campsite. It was a mama skunk and two, separated from her baby three. Somehow they got on the other side of our camp. And the mom was convinced that the only way to round up her family was by going through us. We weren't intense or anything. Anyway, and then a friend started throwing rocks at it. It was really bad, really bad situation. Anyway, I'll tell the story another time. All that to say, what beasts? What's the difference between a human and a beast? Well, there's lots of differences. But there's lots of similarities too. Beasts, wild animals, they are pure instinct, aren't they? Just pure impulse. You don't have to convince a mountain lion to go find food when it's hungry. And you don't have to remind it of the time of year when it needs to go find a partner and reproduce and so on. They're just driven, they're programmed, right, by instinct. And humans are also driven by impulse and instinct, aren't we? But I think we would all agree, whether you're religious or whether you're not religious, we would say a really flourishing, mature human being is actually a human that is not driven purely by instinct or impulse. I think we would say that someone who's truly human is somebody who can check their impulses, who has self-control over their instincts. Because a beast, if you're sitting in front of a mountain lion, just try and convince it not to eat you. It doesn't care, and it won't feel bad once it's gnawing on your rib bones. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't care. But humans should care about that. I think we all agree. A human can't do that to another human and not care. There's something really, really, really wrong about that. Right? Humans have this thing we call consciousness and a moral conscience. And we know that the best version of human beings are human beings who can control their impulses and instincts and live their lives in a way so that for me to survive, you don't have to lose. But I can check my impulses and actually do things that will be best for you. They may not be the best for me, and it may not be the best for what I want in this moment, but I'm going to do it for you anyway so that we can flourish together. That's human beings. That's humanity. It's an ability to be others-centered by checking your impulses. And so Daniel, all of these depictions of beasts, this is the Bible's vision of the human condition. When human beings reject God's authority over them, when we reject God's definition of good and evil, when we exalt our own desires and impulses and appetites to divine significance, individually and collectively, something horrible happens to us. We become beasts. We become beasts, driven by pure impulse and desire and self-preservation. And so these collective kingdoms, right? Think of how a kingdom or a nation of people operates. And for it to live in security, it has to do it somehow at the expense of other people. I wonder if I've heard a story of that anywhere in human history. And so what Jesus does, he stands before his own people. His own people have become the beast. Somehow they think it's actually in Israel's best interest that an innocent man be put to death. How beastly is that? And so Jesus sees all of human history as just one long string of beasts, and Jesus believes that he's here to conquer the beast, to defeat it. And what he actually says in the courtroom, right, is that the moment that you defeat me is the moment that I defeat you. Did you catch that? He said, the moment that you sentence me guilty and to death is the moment that I am exalted and vindicated as king of the world. Jesus believed that he would conquer the beast by letting the beast conquer him. Because what can the beast do to you? What can a mountain lion do to you if you can't convince it not to eat you? It can kill you. It'll take your life and it won't even feel bad for it. But Jesus somehow has a view of the world and of God where he's able to look the mountain lion in the face and say, all you can do is kill me. That's all you can do. You can't separate me from God's love. And your ability to kill me can't separate me from the fact that God is committed to rescuing and redeeming this world and bringing it into a new creation. It's a resurrection. Jesus could stare the beast in the face and call it what it is and know that it will use the only weapon that it has, just selfish impulse, self-preservation, kill. And Jesus says, that's all you got. That's fine. Do what you need to do. And Jesus clearly, like this chapter, is what filled his mind. It's what gave him hope to confront the beast. And there's a beast without. It's the collective beast that Jesus is confronting. But all that is a blown-up version of what happens inside of each one of us. And so here's where I want to land the plane. Because what on earth are we supposed to do with this? But you can see how important this is. In the Bible's point of view, from Daniel's point of view, from Jesus' point of view, what's fundamentally wrong with humans is when we reject God's rule and authority over our lives. We become less than human. And there's the beast without when we all get together, and then there's the beast within that just gets magnified when we form nations and kingdoms. And I think intuitively you know what this is talking about. Like you know the moments in the last 7 days even where there was a choice in front of you about how you were going to respond in a moment. And you had an instinct, right? You had an impulse and a desire that was selfish, and you would benefit from it, but you knew it was wrong. And every single one of us, right? We do this all the time, and then we give in to the beast, right? We become beasts driven by appetite and by desire and by impulse. And in those moments, we become less than human. We lose our humanity. And Jesus is very clear, like from the way he used Daniel 7, he's here to confront the beast because the beast has to die. The beast has ruined God's good world enough. The beast must be destroyed. And so he comes to defeat the beast by letting the beast defeat him. Jesus dies for the beast. Jesus becomes what we are so that we can become what he is. And as we die to the beast inside of us, that's what it means for when Paul the Apostle says, when we take the bread and the cup, we are sharing in the death and the resurrection of Jesus. We're allowing the story of Jesus' death to the beast and his resurrection by the love and power of God to become true of us. And when our life is joined to Jesus' life, we become new and different kinds of humans. And if your experience is anything like mine, it's a very conscious effort every single day to keep the beast down, right? And to keep it in check. And by the love and the power of Jesus, by the empowerment of his Spirit, that's precisely what it means to follow him. And so that's what Daniel 7 invites us into. It invites us to see how the beast has ruined. The beast is what killed Jesus, and it's inside all of us. And we contribute to it, and we participate in it all the time. And despite that fact, Jesus has confronted the beast. He's sentenced it to destruction. And he's committed to rescuing people with his life and with his love. Amen? So here's what I would encourage you to do as we go into worship, is just to allow the Holy Spirit to bring to mind these moments and these decisions from the last 7 days, from the last month, whatever. Moments where you made a choice and you behaved in a way that was less than human. Less than the human that you know God has called you to be. And to bring that and to confess it and to recognize that that is precisely the part of you that died with Jesus as he died to the beast on the cross. And then as we worship and as we sing, to trust in the power and the love of God, that he's committed to you and committed to making you into a new and different kind of human as we go out into our week. That's what this is about. Amen? Amen. Let me close in a word of prayer.